Presenting these speakers does not imply endorsement by our organization. The speakers' comments and opinions are their own. Friends Health Connection does not control the content of the webinar and is not responsible for the content presented. This event is not intended to constitute or replace medical advice, and appropriate medical advice should always be sought by your own medical professional. In their new book, A Parent's Guide to Defeating Eating Disorders, Spotting the Stealth-Bomber and Other Symbolic Approaches, Ahmed, Boachie, and Karin, Jasper, both experienced eating disorder specialists, suggest that a parent's first step to combating an eating disorder is finding a common language with their affected child. This book contains the combined knowledge that Ahmed and Karin have gained through the years of helping families battle these illnesses. Presenting this wealth of knowledge in an easy-to-understand analogies and metaphors, they have created a powerful tool to help families pull together in the face of an illness. Friends Health Connection would like to personally thank both Dr. Jasper and Boachie and everyone listening in for participating in today's webinar. Without further ado, Friends Health Connection is proud to present Ahmed Boachie and Karin Jasper.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you this evening. We've written a book called A Parent's Guide to Defeating Eating Disorders, Spotting the Stealth Bomber and Other Symbolic Approaches. And we've come up with using analogies and metaphors to crystallize an understanding of eating disorders and crucial aspects of their treatment. Children and teens with eating disorders feel that no one understands them, and this makes it very difficult for them to trust anyone and very difficult to engage in treatment. Parents often try to calm their children's anxieties about food by lowering their expectations about what their children should eat, and that plays into the hands of the eating disorder. The analogies and metaphors in our book are meant to help parents understand eating disorders in a way that will allow them to ally with the treatment rather than with the eating disorder. Professionals can also find that our approach increases understanding of complex presentations of eating disorders and thereby find it easier to explain them to parents. Children who believe that others grasp their experience find it easier to open up. They feel understood and appreciated and respected, and it really does help them to listen to what professionals are saying, and it decreases their guilt about having the eating disorder in the first place. So eating disorders really are not like other illnesses. They're very complex. They have both psychological and medical aspects. But if you compare them with something like pneumonia, for instance, pneumonia is very easy to detect. Its harm or potential harm is very obvious. Nobody's confused about that. And the treatment is very clear. So, for the vast majority of people who have pneumonia, it can be cleared up with a simple treatment. Whereas with eating disorders, because they're poorly understood, a lot of myths and misconceptions arise. So, for instance, only white affluent girls get eating disorders. Or if a person's eating candy and chips, well, they couldn't possibly have an eating disorder. Or if you just leave it alone, it'll pass, it's just a phase. Or if it's understood that there's an illness that needs treatment, often people think it's just the teen or child who needs the treatment, that families don't need to be involved. So these are all misconceptions and myths that arise when an illness is very poorly understood, like an eating disorder. So we like to make it easier for everybody involved to understand so that they can work together to the benefit of the child.
And so I will just say something about the reason why it's sometimes difficult to detect, even for an alert, observant parent. So the reason is that sometimes, although the parents are the first to observe some changes, the symptoms are so subtle that it's difficult to make anything out of it. But for an observant parent, that may be very important, which sometimes creates problems because by the time they go to the doctor, the symptoms are not very obvious. So it's difficult for the doctor to agree that this is an eating disorder. And there are reasons for that because eating disorder is such a kind of a dangerous illness that has potential to end the lives of about 20% of people who have it. Therefore, the doctor has to be careful before they validate what the mother is observing. For example, a mother will observe that her daughter or son, and from here on I will use daughter just to represent both sexes, often wears baggy or loose-fitting clothes. and either to hide the weight or a weight loss or because of a profound sense of body dissatisfaction. It's very difficult to tell. Sometimes they will notice their child has increased use of caffeinated drinks, including coffee, cola, smoking, or gum chewing. And sometimes they just suddenly come home and they want to be vegetarian. And it's very difficult to know whether that is for a kind of a belief system or what does it actually represent, whether it's for a weight loss. And then sometimes the children become very defensive or anxious when body, weight, or shape issues are openly discussed or challenged, or even if not about self directly, they still become very defensive. And sometimes it's during a holiday or special occasion, and when the child becomes very, very stressful, and then usually revolve around large meals and constant eating or drinking. Sometimes the behaviors are all about food. There are so many rituals. They may cut food into certain size pieces or eat plates of food in a specific way. And they are all not directly signs and symptoms of what we define as eating disorders. And sometimes they just won't participate in activities where one's body can be scrutinized. And so with this in mind, sometimes very, very difficult to make any sense of it. And mom is torn between going to the doctor and complaining about this or trusting the doctor, who at this time will be very defensive. So when we get into that situation, we use an analogy like the stealth bomber. But that goes like a stealth aircraft uses technology that makes them very difficult to detect, even by radar. Their attack missions cannot be prevented by conventional means. That means if you are looking for it and you are using binoculars, for example, there will be nothing there. In the meantime, it will have dropped bomb and disappeared before you realize it has hit you. That's exactly what happened in eating disorders. So a conversation between a mom and daughter will go like this. Sweetie, are you eating well? And the daughter will say something, yes, mom, I ate a lot over my friend's house. And it's very difficult to make sense of that. And eating disorder, like I said, is like a stealth bomber, very challenging to detect and very destructive. Most of the typical questions we ask to uncover it are about as effective as using binoculars to look for the bomber. So what we say that even by the time the physicians or the clinicians see the child, sometimes they might have had the illness so deep that then people start panicking, by which time it's almost very difficult to reverse it unless you put in a lot of energy and kind of care. For example, by the time the family doctor notices massive weight loss, amenorrhea or irritability, and dizziness, headache, and low blood pressure and all those things, the illness might have gone on for a longer time. So we find out that eating disorders are by nature illnesses of immotivation. They are really, really non-motivated. Sometimes we talk about stages of change. Most of the time they are in pre-contemplative because the young people are defensive and they don't think they have any eating disorders. In this situation, you have to find other ways of convincing them or getting them for treatment. And we know that parents play an essential role in recovery. Basically, what that means is that now all evidence kind of are pointing more and more towards the fact that our best chance of getting these children well is by using the family therapy. They have many modalities. And we also know that the earlier you detect this illness, the earlier you start intervention, and the earlier you include the family, the better the outcome. So our question is, what can we do to help this family to focus on a way that they will not dissuade themselves from a very convincing, rationalized child trying to deny an illness? And that's why this book, it makes a difference, because the analogies bring home the point of the fact that the mother has to understand certain things to appreciate in a different way so that it will be able to hold her, she'll be able to hold her ground in trying to deal with this illness. So essentially, for parents to get as much information as possible and the full of appreciation of this illness, we use a lot of analogies. And in this case, we use one of the analogies that we usually will refer to as a Lord of the Rings, and I'll allow Karin to talk about that.
So as Ahmed is telling you, that children can find it very difficult to trust, partly because they're really not convinced themselves that they have an illness that needs to be changed. And the eating disorder is helping them in some specific ways. For instance, it could be helping them to organize themselves. It helps them make decisions about what they should eat, about what they should value, about what makes them a good person. And so if they're holding on to that in order to feel that way, it's going to be difficult to take it away from them. And it can't really be done without them playing a part in that, but it is really necessary for the parents to be involved because they won't often take those first steps themselves. So you think about it as this trust issue as related to the Lord of the Rings, the story of the Lord of the Rings, where Frodo, if you've heard the story, is taking the ring of power, which is a force of evil, taking that ring of power to Mount Doom and has to throw it over the edge into the molten lava below. But he has to also not get pulled into the power of the ring himself. And so his friend Sam is with him on that quest. And Sam is guiding him along the way. But they both get lost at one point and don't know how to get to Mount Doom. And along comes Gollum, a creature who says he knows the terrain and he can take them there. And Gollum works very hard to get in between Sam and Frodo and to get Frodo to trust him. Because really what Gollum wants to do is to get that ring for himself and to interfere with that quest. So he tries to do that, and Frodo, in fact, is getting pulled into that more and more. But luckily, Sam sticks with him, does not give up, and is able to finally show that it's Gollum who is the one not to be trusted, and they are able to pitch the ring into the molten lava along with Gollum, actually, at the end. So similarly with eating disorders, they come to young people when they're at their most vulnerable, and they promise young people everything and make them disbelieve and distrust those who really love them the most. They need their family and their friends to stay with them even through the darkest times of the recovery.
And then again, so after some time, hopefully the mom, the family, and the family doctors have managed to convince this young person that she has an illness. And that means they have to start helping the young person. And again, although the young person now probably appreciates he has the illness, she will still continue to refuse help. And sometimes the family doctor or the therapist are thinking the kid is too difficult, doesn't want to get help. It's not because she doesn't want to get it. Eating disorder doesn't even always come all by itself. Sometimes there are comorbid conditions like depression, anxiety, obsessive-compulsive behaviors, and other fears that they may not talk about. So to be able to make a point, we usually use the leaky raft kind of analogy, which goes like, if you can imagine that you are a parent and your child is drowning in a massive sea and has only a poorly constructed raft to hold on to keep herself above water. Although she knows that the raft is leaking, at least she's convinced that it's been helping her stay alive. You know that the water is carrying your child towards a dangerous waterfall not far away, but he cannot see it. So you go and arrange for a rescue helicopter to send, is sent to dangle a rope for her to grab. But she refuses to let go. And what she's saying to herself, they don't even know that I'm afraid of height. What if I leave the leaky raft and then the rope snaps? So that the parents will not know that, and they may likely give up and think she just doesn't want to get help. And that becomes very difficult because the kids want the parents to hold on and help them anyways. So we think once we explain those kind of situations to parents, they usually make it clear, and then they hold on to their resolve and continue to engage the young person and seek help until finally they get to where they need to be.
And so those are a few examples of the kinds of metaphors and analogies we use. We use them in every part of the recovery process. We use them to explain to the parents the medical complications of the eating disorder so they can understand the need for intervention. But we'd like to know what specific kinds of things you're interested in hearing more about, and so we'd like to entertain some questions from the audience at this point.
Sure, we have a couple questions. First one is coming in, and it's, what do you believe is the hardest part of the recovery process for a child with an eating disorder?
Okay. Well, I think there are a lot of hard parts, but certainly the part that seems to be the most difficult is when the parents begin to challenge the eating disorder and are really holding on in that part of the process so that the child is in a position where she's eating regular meals or trying to eat regular meals with her parents' support, or in the case of bulimia, for instance, parents are watching that she's not using the bathroom after the meals or exercising too much. So where the symptoms themselves are being challenged by the parents, that's often where the child's behavior will become quite volcanic in a way, because they're having to tolerate not using the thing that makes them feel good on a day-to-day basis. And so there's lots of, you could call them resistances or behaviors that they'll throw up in the way of their parents in order to try to push their parents off so that they can go back to the symptoms again, which are the most comfortable place for them at the time. So parents often then see behaviors that they've never seen before in their child. Often the child's been very compliant up until that point, and so it can be difficult for the whole family, including the siblings, to have these kinds of behaviors going on, which could include running away, they can include throwing things, and parents have to deal with all of those behaviors in ways that contain the behaviors and keep the child safe. And that process can take several months, although as the child gets to be clear that the parents aren't going to back off, those behaviors usually quiet down, and the eating disorder behaviors then can continue to decrease. I think that's probably, would you agree, that's the most difficult time?
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Our next question coming in is from Sam, and he would like to know, what can we as parents do if we think that our children may be suffering from an eating disorder? And how do we warn them about the dangers of an eating disorder?
Yes, so thanks, Sam. Most parents ask this question. The fact is, anything you do to engage your child after you think you suspect eating disorder is most important. The most important that you have to do is not trying to sneak behind the child's back, facing the issues and discussing it frankly with the child. They may resist in so many ways, but deep down, we know they are hoping you are not backing off. So once you think you have a suspicion, we will suggest that because this illness occurs in family and every member of the family is important, we suggest you talk about it as a family. Do not make assumptions. Michael, 13 years, doesn't need to know this, or the brother, 19 years, may not want to hear this. The husband, the wife, whoever is part of the family should be mobilized and inform the young person they want to get help. Because it is important to use the same language. The minute there's discrepancy, the eating disorder will wet in and destroy the relationship the family have built. And then everybody starts accusing each other, and the family find themselves just winding around the illness, and the illness becomes the central thing that is keeping everybody apart. So once you decide that, the next step is to get professional help. If you go to the doctor, because like I said before, the doctor may initially not find any physical symptoms that will make them become convinced that they have eating disorder. But the family have to provide united fronts, and the young person may be resisting, but they should continue to support her and convince the family doctor at least to do examination and also ask some specific questions. And if they don't even find complications, he should be able to refer them to specialists who usually will be able to put a diagnosis on the child, appropriate diagnosis, so that they can start actual management. And every member of the family should be allowed to be involved right from the word go.
Great. Thank you for that. Our next question coming in is from username Butterflies. What if you are concerned about a child that is not yours? How do you approach other parents to tell them that you are concerned about somebody else's child?
I think the first thing to consider is that you may actually be noticing things that the child's parents are actually not noticing. So it's quite possible that you have information to give to the parents that they don't already have. And so it's important that if you are concerned, and it appears that the parents are not aware, that you approach them. And that would depend on the relationship that you have with them. If they're neighbors or friends or relatives, then you can call them up like you would normally call them up, or meet with them and just let them know what you've seen and what it is that has made you concerned, and why you think it might be an eating disorder.
So I would just add that sometimes we get that kind of information from school counselors. And whilst their role is to support the young people in terms of their education, I think they are also supposed to help them deal with emotional issues. So when something like that happens at school, it's important the counselor, again, playing the role of a helpful person, approach the young person and ask frank questions. I think it's within, especially in Canada, it's within their right to be able to talk about stuff like that. And let the child know, how can I help you get your family involved? The reason why you approach it that way, because if you say, I can help you, what do you want me to do? The child is more likely to say, don't tell my parent, and then you are stuck. So if you tell them that it's my role, if you did something extraordinary, we need to ask your permission to tell the parent. But this is a concern, this is a deadly illness, so you need your family to get well. And therefore, how can we work another way? And with that language, most of the young person are able to confide in them and allow them to reach out to the families.
Okay, great. I have another question for you, and it's, do you think that young children and teenagers, especially females, feel the need to portray body images of celebrities and people in the media? And could this contribute to being one of the main causes of eating disorders?
Yes, I mean, the first thing to say is that we don't know what causes eating disorders. We know that there are quite a range of factors that increase the risk that someone will develop an eating disorder. But you're talking about the culture that we live in, that there's a growing kind of pressure on boys around body image, but there's enormous pressure on girls and women around body image. And it gets across this idea that, to be valued as a girl, you should look like this. And so girls who are otherwise vulnerable also are going to be more likely to be feeling the pressure of this in a deeper way than perhaps every other girl is. But it's like a fertile ground for eating disorders, the way that the culture is in that way.
Okay, thank you. We have another question coming in from our text chat. How do you combat the growing prevalence of pro-anorexia websites?
That has been some subject of debate, and because the internet is like a sword, a two-edged sword. It can be very, very helpful even to people with eating disorder to go to some specific sites to be able to learn how to combat them. At the same time, unfortunately, there are other sites that people who are already vulnerable will go there and learn how to perfect this kind of illness. What we say that, yes, that can serve as a trigger because they go there reading and they don't usually know who wrote it, and I'm not sure those people writing those sites are usually professionals who are doing that. So the whole idea is, if you think your child uses the internet as a good medium, then our best bet is to encourage them to look at other positive sites with your supervision to know that this is really an illness and help them to get authentic information about the eating disorders. The whole idea is to try and discourage them, but you have to be able to use the language the child is using to start from. So if you keep on showing them sites that are positive and listening to the programs like what we are doing now, they will hear two aspects of the illness, and hopefully by being vigilant, you will be able to dissuade them. But if it's getting serious and she's not going out of that situation, then as a parent, you have to exercise your right to either put in a lock or make sure that she has very limited access to those sites, because truly they sometimes enhance the young people's deep-rooted belief that eating disorder is a good thing to have.
Okay, great. The next question is, you see these TV shows all over the television about interventions. Would you say that interventions are a really strong way to address the issue of someone having an eating disorder?
Like an intervention as it's done on that TV show? Is that
the way that interventions are, where they sit the person down and they have an entire room of people just going after this one person with this disorder?
I would say that I don't think, because we're talking about children and adolescents specifically, I don't think it's necessary to have a whole, group of people like that to make an intervention. I think it can be just that the parents sit down with the child, take the child to the doctor. Confirming that there is a reason to be worried is probably the first step, and then parents can start learning about what sort of interventions they can make.
I would just add that sometimes the problem is not the intervention as such. Eating disorders are very serious illnesses. If the intervention comes across to an already vulnerable child as easy to deal with kind of a treatment, because you can just talk about it and it goes away. If that's how it comes across, then usually it's not helpful to anybody, because we know that eating disorder could be long-term, chronic, intractable, and actually kill 20% of people. And in reality, it takes quite a time to get them to a safe place, because they are children, they are various developmental levels, they are naturally defiant as teenagers. So if the intervention, the educational aspect coming across is, especially if people are role-playing and saying that these are some aspects of eating disorders and it can take longer. So we are just trying to educate you, go see your doctors and do the right thing. Like most advertisements do the same thing. This medication is good for headache, but if you are not sure, go see your doctor. If they can say something like that, then it becomes most useful. Because children and adolescents are impressionists. Sometimes parents are also struggling, they are busy, so they are looking for shortcuts. And I can say to date, there isn't any shortcut in managing eating disorders. You can treat them for them to get very well and go on with their life and live longer. But it will be a mistake if any intervention, whether it's on TV or discussions or even program not on TV, comes across like it's easy to deal with, because it isn't.
Great. Thank you for that. We did have another question come through from Roxanne. How can we discuss healthy eating and weight with our children without making them preoccupied with what they eat and their weight?
Yeah, that's a great question, because, of course, the main concern that gets put across these days is the concern about obesity. And so often the messages that we're putting out about that really can activate children who are vulnerable to eating disorders and precipitate them to develop an eating disorder. One of the first things to know is that children's weights are a moving target. Children are in a developmental phase where we shouldn't be messing with their weights in the first place. So in order for them to develop, when they're 11 or 12, to develop to be an 18-year-old who's got her periods and her brain is fully developed and her bones have maximum density and so on, we need to be focusing more on making sure that they have good food, balanced meals, and include foods from all of the food groups. So there's no making, contrasting good foods with bad foods, but really looking at the place that all foods have in our eating plans.
And I'll just add that we know from research that not all children who develop eating disorders were overweight or obese in the first place. Mm-hmm. In fact, majority of them are normal weight. It's just their perception due to some special risk factors of vulnerability that they have. So it will be a mistake to, just let them say the treatment is just, dieting is a good thing. It may be good in so many different situations. I'm not denying that. But for a child growing, research has suggested that, in fact, if you allow a child to diet consistently, it may increase their chance of developing unnecessary weight about 330%. So it's about getting them being active, having a healthy lifestyle, eating normally, and working with the family and getting their health back. Because not all of them were obese or overweight in the first place.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to answer the questions. If there are no further questions, Friends Health Connection would like to thank both Dr. Karin, Jasper. Oh, I'm sorry, we have another question coming through. When do you take action and get a child help with an eating disorder?
Sorry, I didn't quite hear that.
When do you take action and get a child help with an eating disorder?
when do you take action and get a child help for an eating disorder?
Right
yes, and
right away.
Immediately. So as soon as you have suspicions about that, take your child to the doctor and see what the doctor says. And if you continue to have suspicions after you've gone to the doctor and the doctor hasn't confirmed them, go again. Don't give up if you think that really is the problem.
Generally, children are not supposed to be losing weight when it's not medically indicated. If you look at all growth charts, children weight continues to grow proportionally until they are a certain age and height, and then it may stop naturally. And therefore, anytime you suspect eating disorders, you act right away. Like I said, mobilize all your resources, because every single month that you wait and the child is not coming to their desired progress developmental level, it is going to affect the child's growth. Actually, if they don't get the weight or get their weight kind of at the right time, some of the children have lost height and they have not had their period, which have got serious implications for their health, including osteoporosis, and in the future, the young women may not be able to have children. So anything that you can do initially to help them regain their weight fast, or if they are binging and purging, to stop it quickly, is acceptable, but don't delay.
Great. Well, we want to thank you so much from Friends Health Connection for doing this live webinar. You can log on to community.friendshealthconnection.org to see this webinar recorded and watch again and send to a friend if you think that they can use the information presented here today. And if you would like to say anything else, we would appreciate your final thoughts, final words of wisdom.
I don't have anything to add at the moment. Thanks for having us here.
Okay.
And I would say eating disorders are illnesses like any other illness. Don't delay in helping your children to get help. And you, the parent, have got the key to their recovery.
Great. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
You're welcome.